Okay, so you all can't see this. I'm watching the countdown here, and I'm a rule follower, so I'm waiting until it gets to the time when I'm supposed to talk, but that's now. So good afternoon. I'm Brooke Stearns-Lawson. I'm the Experimentation, Innovation, and Learning Team Lead in USAID's Anti-Corruption Center, and I also oversee USAID's Countering Transnational Corruption Grand Challenge for Development, USAID's 12th Grand Challenge. I'm thrilled to be joined on stage by three of our innovative solvers who proposed some of the most promising solutions to countering corruption in the green energy, just energy transition space. And I would really like most of the conversation to be from them. I did just want to take a moment to, and this is also for those of you who will be listening to this recording after as well, but I just wanted to take a moment and honor a dear colleague, Kim Thompson, who really spearheaded USAID's critical minerals work. I had never heard the word critical minerals or the phrase critical minerals before. And Kim, early days, recognized the immense importance of getting it right in the green energy transition critical minerals space. She spearheaded the effort. She built a coalition in USAID to be working on this topic long before it was the topic of the day. And her work was instrumental in leading to powering a just energy transition green minerals challenge. So Kirk, thank you for sharing Kim with us and her work in the community. This is just really a testament to the power of possible and the good work that we're done. So thank you all for doing the work that you do in the green energy space and really propelling this legacy forward. So with that, I will now try to keep it together to deliver the remarks that that set up this panel more specifically in this context. So, as we all know, countering corruption is essential to fulfilling USAID's mission of strengthening democratic societies and advancing a free, just, and peaceful world. To drive inclusive, sustainable, locally led development and safeguard our investments, USAID is making preventing and rooting out corruption a top priority. And nowhere is this more important than in the critical minerals green energy space. Through our work at the Anti-Corruption Center and across USAID, we are taking concrete actions to mobilize broad-based coalitions and partnerships, galvanize collective action across sectors, elevate anti-corruption considerations in policymaking, and serve USAID and the broader community with innovative, cutting-edge, and responsive technical leadership, support, and programming. In this spirit, thank you again for joining us today, and we will now focus more on specifically the green minerals space. Tonight's conversations are 2 years in the making. In 2022, USAID, in partnership with Amazon, BHP Foundation, and Chandler Foundation, announced our first activity under the Countering Transnational Corruption Grand Challenge for Development, the Powering a Just Energy Transition Green Minerals Challenge, more simply known as JET Minerals Challenge. The JET Minerals Challenge catalyzes the development, application, and scaling of innovations to counter corruption and strengthen transparency, accountability, and integrity in the global rush to meet unprecedented demand for green minerals. Our speakers today, as I mentioned, come to us as winners of the JET Minerals Challenge. With implementation underway since the end of last year, these winners are eager to share their progress to date, their learnings around key considerations for approaching this work, and ideas for how we might come together to further support their efforts for sustainable impact. Panelists will share their unique journeys in refining, adapting, and developing innovative approaches to counter corruption in the scramble for green minerals. The winning JET Minerals Challenge approaches vary in terms of innovative stage and region, with today's panelists implementing their work in Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America. Some solutions expand responsible minerals work to more explicitly tackle corruption, while others apply existing anti-corruption approaches to the minerals space. To kick us off, I'm thrilled to welcome Marco Zaplin, the Executive Director for GovData Initiative. Marco here today is representing his team and partners, Manila Observatory and Sustainable Development Strategies Group, and their work on Jet Minerals Challenge, Winning Project, Community Development Agreement, Digital Innovation Hub, Transparency and Community Development Agreements, and Mining Revenues. This innovative solution addresses the lack of transparency around the impacts and benefits of mining for affected communities by integrating a database of mining-related community agreements, a revenue transparency tool, contextual data, and relevant international frameworks. Marco, we're excited to hear more. We have plenty of time for Q&A after we hear from our speakers, so keep that in mind as the teams are eager to hear from the audience as well. Marco, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Brooke, for the kind introduction. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. That's good evening, everyone in the Philippines. My name is Marco Zaplan. I'm from the Gulf Data Initiative, and I'd like to start my sharing with a game, which I hope some of you or most of you are familiar with. It's called 4 Picks, 1 Word. Familiar? Yeah. So I'm going to show 4 pictures, and you have to guess the word. And whoever gets the answer correctly in 10 seconds wins a prize from the Philippines. Yeah? Ready? Okay, let's show the 4 pictures and the word. So raise your hand if you know the answer. 10, 9. Yes, Phyllis? Community? Is it community? Yes. Thank you. Congratulations.
Woohoo! Did you know in advance?
No. It was all transparent.
Corruption.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your participation. So the correct answer is community. So today I'm going to talk about communities, more specifically transparency in community development agreements and why it matters in the just energy transition. So allow me to begin with the story of the Palawan tribe in the Philippines. If you drive a Tesla Model S or know someone who does, there's a very high chance that the nickel cobalt sulfide used in the EV battery was mined and processed within the ancestral domain of the Palawan tribe. So in 2017, we met members of the tribe and we showed to them our EITI country report, and they were shocked. At number one, how significant the benefits that they are receiving from the mining operations. And number two, how their communities remain impoverished despite the significant amounts of money flowing into their communities. So the Palawan tribe is just one of the many mining communities in the Philippines and around the world who lack the access to these kinds of information and the capacity to analyze this information. And in an environment where there's lack of transparency and when no one is watching, we know that that is where corruption thrives. So last year, with support from the USAID Jet Minerals Challenge, we at the Manila Observatory, the Sustainable Development Strategies Group, and the Gulf Data Initiative launched the Community Development Agreement Digital Innovation Hub, or CDA Hub for short, in 2 mining communities in the Philippines. So the CDA Hub, basically, it's an online portal that hosts community development agreements and a data dashboard that we develop at the GDI. It's called Predict, which is short for Projecting Revenues from the Extractives for the Development and Investment in Communities tool. So we're very creative with acronyms. So with the help of the CDA Hub and the Predict tool, we aim for our mining communities to know, number one, what is due to them as mandated by law. Number two, how much is due to them. Number three, did they receive these benefits at the right amount? And most importantly, number four, where are the benefits going? So late last year, we engaged with our national government agencies, and we were fortunate to have endorsements from our Mines and Geosciences Bureau and our Department of Budget and Management. Early this year, we conducted a very extensive local stakeholder outreach, which included provincial and municipal governments, mining companies, indigenous peoples, academic institutions, and local CSOs. And last month, we conducted a very well-attended design thinking workshops and focus group discussions with this very same stakeholders, but this time at the same venue, which was provided to us for free by the local governments, which for us is a testament of our stakeholders' commitment and interest in the project. So far, the project has been sailing quite smoothly. And I'd also like to share some of the lessons that we have learned so far and the factors that we think allowed us to sail smoothly so far. So, firstly, we think that it helped that we were very transparent with our stakeholders, what we want to achieve, what we plan to deliver, and how we want them to be involved. Second, we were quite fortunate to have high level buy in from our national government, which made it so much easier for us to onboard two mining companies and the local governments hosting this mining operations. And third, but not the least, we think that at the very core of the project, we are addressing a real problem. And so there's concrete demand from our stakeholders. We went the extra mile to extensively consult our stakeholders what data, information, and capacity building activities that they need. So we think that it really helped that we engage our stakeholders every step of the process so that we know what their needs are, what the root causes of the problems are, so that we are able to develop relevant solutions with them, and eventually for our local stakeholders to gain ownership of the project. So in the coming months, we plan to conduct our capacity development activities, which was also informed by inputs from our stakeholders themselves, and a data use competition for young people with our partner academic institutions. Next year, we plan to scale up the project in more mining operations all over the country. So, as I've mentioned a while ago, we're piloting it in two mining communities. Nationally, we have 56 active mining operations and 298 approved mining contracts. So we're really just scratching the surface of the problem. We still have a very long way to go. We still have roadblocks when it comes to disclosing these community development agreements. But despite all of that, we think that we have a very concrete path toward institutionalization of these initiatives, given the multi-stakeholder buy-in at the national and at the local level. We already have a proof of concept. To a great extent, we already know what works and what does not work. But we still need more political, technical, and financial support to get to a place where our initiatives get institutionalized by the government. So if there are any members of the audience who'd be interested to work with us, we're very open to collaborate with all of you. So to wrap up my sharing, some of you are probably wondering why our solutions focus too much at the local level. When, as we've discussed through the last few days, corruption is becoming more and more transnational in nature. Big mining companies are mostly multinationals. Metal prices and demand are set by the international market when policies are set by international standards and national priorities. Local because that is where the impacts of mining and transnational corruption are. That even when there are effective international and national anti corruption efforts, when those are not felt at the local level, then to whom are we doing transparency for? Since we have launched the project, we have seen that when local stakeholders are engaged, given the right tools and targeted support, they themselves can and will deliver for their communities. And we at the CDA Hub believes that for us to have a just energy transition where no one gets left behind, we need to go local and empower communities. Thank you.
So much, Marco, for sharing your team's creative and collective work at the local level in the Philippines and with such robust stakeholder engagement with, like you said, mining companies and local government. That really does show the collective action effort that you can make. I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Elevine. Are you ready? Nkonjera. How'd I do?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect.
She's the project manager at Perekezi ASM Consultants. and she's here today to share more about her team's Jet Minerals Challenge winning project, empowering stakeholders, driving just resource governance through open contracting and licensing. Olivine, we are so excited about this opportunity to hear more about your work leveraging in-depth journalism to increase the transparency and accountability of government agencies, as well as to empower citizens and civil society with information that spurs dialogue about corruption in Malawi. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I would like to ask the audience to fasten their seatbelts because we're now flying from Philippines to Malawi, the home heart of Africa. I think, as the previous speaker said, my talk is also mainly focusing on the community aspect. I think for the whole of this week, we've heard how corruption is manifested at higher level, and we've learned about all the technical ways. But now, I want us now to contextualize into the reality of it at the local level. So I'll also focus more on the community aspect. I want to start by sharing a story that happened in one of the mining sites in Malawi. That's the northern part of Malawi. So there was this, I will put in a name so that we can actually have a human feel out of this. There was a woman called Nagomba. Nagomba was living in a community up north in the country, and her ways of livelihood were to cultivate, and mainly she was cultivating rice. Because she was quite in an advanced age, around 55, she was staying with her grandchildren. All her children had moved to town to fetch for a better life. So she stayed with the grandchildren and herself. It was in 2008 when they received visitors in their area, telling them that there was a discovery of coal under the ground. So according to the legislation of Malawi, just like any other countries, is that whatever is on the surface belongs to you, but whatever is underground belongs to the government. So the government, together with an investor, came in to say that all this land has been licensed. Therefore, Nagomba and other people living in that area are going to be relocated to another place. They'll actually be compensated and be asked to go and settle somewhere else. So for them, it was something that was quite shocking. They did not really know what was happening, but then they were given all the promises that, okay, so we are going to give you money, you will move to another place, you're going to start your livelihoods there, you're going to continue with your cultivation from the compensation that you're going to get. And this was the government informing them, or the government telling them what is supposed to be done. Nagomba and all the other people, they indeed received the compensation money, but that money was not enough to enable them buy another land. So instead, they just moved closer to the area, but it was still the licensed area for this mining company. The mining company came in, started mining with all the promises to government that were going to generate revenue that is going to contribute to the development of the country. Nagomba and her colleagues, they stayed surrounding the mine, but what did they face along the way? One, the company, because it was mining underground using the open cast approach, so they cleared the land, they dug the holes, and then there was also a lot of water pollution. Some of the water was polluting the nearby wells that Nagomba and her colleagues were using or were fetching their water, and this actually leading to, exposing them to various diseases. But you also have to take into consideration that this mine was actually far away from the town, whereby if they get sick, they had to walk long distances for them to go and access the nearest health service. After 3 years, the company felt like it was not making much profits, so they just closed the mine, or they just stopped operating, leaving their equipment there and left. What did they leave behind? They dug holes, which also, they were now filled up with water, and eventually these became death traps to livestock and also to children. One of the days, Nagomba's grandchild was playing with her colleagues, fell into the ponds. The time they went to rescue the child was what? Passed on. So in our culture, in Malawi, we are a passive community, whereby when things happen, we just say that, oh no, they happen, let's accept. By the way, Malawi is considered as the warm heart of Africa. So in this whole story, okay, so did we know about this? No. This happened around 20, so the mine started in 2008. These things were happening around 2011. And it had to take a journalist with interest to go and find out what happened to this abandoned mine. And that's when we learned the story about Nagomba. So I was sharing this story as just one of the small mines, a core mine, not even linked to the critical minerals. But then now you can see that if with a small mine, we made all these mistakes. The question that you have is that, what went wrong in this? We're looking, first of all, at the legal framework. Was our policy and our legal environment sufficient to protect Nagomba and other communities living in this area? The answer is no, because if it was sufficient, the communities, they were supposed to be informed about this project before even issuing the license to the investor. But instead, they came along with the investor. Two, were they properly compensated? The answer is no. If they were properly compensated, they could have gone and found a better land where they could have continued their livelihoods, but they were not. The third aspect, was there free, prior, informed consent? No, there was no free, prior, informed consent. But was Nagomba strong enough to protest about this? No, they were not empowered, or they were not empowered for them to speak out for themselves. This is why things ended up like this. But is this what we want our minerals to be doing to us? No, minerals are supposed to be a blessing to contribute to the development of the country and individuals and people living around it. But if they are promoting the other thing, then they're not worth it. They're now becoming as a curse. But that shouldn't be that shouldn't be the way of doing this. I was emphasizing on this story because when we talk about corruption, we always think about it at very high level, but it can happen at any level. This might have also been facilitated at the district level, at the government level. Maybe there wasn't even a lot of money being exchanged, but everyone, there are different people that did not do what they were supposed to do. And this is how corruption can manifest in different ways. So now what triggered for us to participate in this challenge as Perekezi SM consultants? We looked at Malawi being a small country, something that has not experienced much in mining. Now there are a lot of discoveries of the green minerals. So the question was, are we prepared as a country to start, as a country, to ensure that now the challenges that Nagomba felt 10 years ago, they do not remanifest now. So through the process, I will admit that Malawi has made progress, because through these stories, it triggered into the revision of the Mines and Minerals Act, into the revision of our legislation, improved engagement, and Malawi is also participating in the Extractive Industries Trust-Based Initiative. However, are we there yet? Our question, I think our answer is that no, we can still do better. It's better to put your house in order at this stage than now to start addressing when the problems have already been created. So as Perekezi SM consultants, we participated in the Jet Minerals Challenge, and our focus was that the story of Nagomba should not repeat. And what did we do? We said that, okay, we write a project or a proposal which should mainly focus on the empowerment aspect, because Malawi has been dominated by passive citizens. I should say passive because we didn't have full information. The communities do not have full information. And secondly, which problem exactly are we trying to address? We're trying to look at the transnational corruption issue. We're trying to look at enhancing transparency and accountability, and also empowering the citizens. I'm emphasizing on the transparency and accountability aspect is because there's one thing about being transparent, but then are you being accountable? I'll go back to my culture whereby I'm a woman. If I'm a wife, sometimes I have to be fully owned by my husband, not in a bad way, but I have to be a responsibility of my husband. So for me as a wife, I don't want only to know how much money my husband makes, but I also want to see how we spend that money. Is it being spent in the house or it's outside? This is just on a lighter note, but just to give in the aspect of transparency, because it's one thing disclosing how much you're making, it's another thing on how you're spending. So even the communities, they're also entitled to that. They don't need to know company X paid 50,000 US dollars to our government, but how was that money spent? Is it going on the basic needs? Is it going on this, on that? So our project really tries to uproot or to bring out the issues of transparency and accountability, and also bringing this context in the local way possible to the communities, that they understand exactly what's happening. So in this Jet Minerals Challenge, we focused on two aspects: using investigative journalism, and on the other hand, looking at the capacity building aspect. But before implementation of all this, we had to do a thorough study or investigation, or I should say analysis of our legislation, looking at our systems. Are they adequate at present to protect or not to enable corruption to happen? Secondly, we also looked at the aspect of, looking at the regulations, the systems, the regulations, but also most importantly, the institutions. Do we have the right institutions that are going to enable to make sure that corruption doesn't happen in the green mineral, with the discovery of the different green minerals, that the story of Nagomba and should not repeat. So through this approach, I would say that we have actually had a very good start in the implementation of the project, because we conducted a corruption risk assessment, which we mainly looked at our legislation, at our systems, and look at where are the loopholes, how now do we mitigate these risks that they should not happen for corruption not to take place and all that. So the study came out, we used those findings to now build the capacity of the investigative journalists as well as the civil society, because these are strong at bringing in change. And with those findings, the investigative journalists are further digging the stories to find out more stories of the Nagombas, what's happening at lower level, at the community level, and also what's happening at maybe at the national level, which systems have problems that we need to be addressing. So if you look at my slide, let me now start my presentation. I'm joking, it's just one slide. What we're trying to say is, if you look at this slide, I think it fully explains our project. The picture on the left, that's our president, our late vice president who just passed on last week in a plane crash, and the minister of mining. These are the key people that make policies and that also monitor implementation of policies. How do we approach them? You approach them with investigation. With information that is credible. Mostly we would think that politicians or maybe the policymakers will make decisions based on their interest, but sometimes they also lack information. So who brings that information to us? It's by us, to them. It's by us finding the right information, you take it to them. If they make wrong decisions at that point, that's when they are greedy. But if they make decisions when they don't have full information, that's where we say we have a problem. So for now, our first engagement is that let's find information that is coming from the picture of from the local communities, taking that information to the policymakers, and they help to shape our policies that they indeed safeguard the interest of the local community or the local communities. So who does that? It's us. So this is more or less like a panel, like we're sitting here. Based on our findings, we discuss, we make recommendations, we approach the policymakers and see now how we're going to progress with the implementation. So probably, I'm sorry, maybe I might have taken long, but yeah, for now, this is basically our approach to the Jet Minerals Challenge. Thank you.
Okay, and what's the one word for your 4 pictures? I'm just teasing. We won't have them for all of the slides, but it's funny that there are. So you can be thinking about what the one word is that comes to mind when you look at those. So yeah. I'm going to turn now to last but not least, our final speaker on the panel, Clancy Moore. Clancy's here today representing TI Australia's winning Jet Minerals Challenge project, the Responsible Mining Business Integrity, RMBI, tool for green mineral sourcing. Clancy, thanks for joining and to discuss the refinement of the RBMI tool. We're looking forward to hearing more about your experience, increasing knowledge and collaboration between civil society and the mining industry, and promoting business integrity practices, improving anti-corruption capabilities within the private sector in Argentina and Colombia. So, as Levine said, put on your seatbelts. We're now going from Malawi to South America.
And also Indonesia and Zimbabwe and Zambia, 5 countries. It's a lot.
So many places.
You need a round-the-world ticket, maybe twice, to get back.
Where are we starting?
So thank you, Brooke, and thank you, USAID, for hosting this fantastic panel. Also, thank you for coming. I know it's 6 o'clock on the 3rd day. You're all tired. Some people are jet-lagged. There's probably other great panels happening at the same time, so thank you for making the time to come to this one. I don't think any other panel has had a game and such good photos as ours, so I'm just putting it out there. We're doing pretty well. I'm also going to borrow from my esteemed colleague Marco. I've got a little quiz for you. So 2 questions. Firstly, hands up if you know what the most corrupt economic sector is. At the back. Exactly, mining, oil and gas. So 2016-17, the OECD put out a report which clearly articulated the mining, oil and gas sector as being the most corrupt economic sector. Question number 2, how many people live in resource-rich countries? Any ideas? Who wants to have a guess?
Multiple choice. Can I phone
Multiple
a
choice?
friend?
6 billion, 5 billion, or 3.5 billion people?
Oh, well,
3.5, exactly. So 3.5 billion people, women and men, live in resource-rich countries. Of that, around 2 in 10, or almost 2 in 10 people globally, are living in resource-rich countries, earning less than $2 a day, below the poverty line as well. So when we talk about transnational corruption in that context, it's literally stripping communities of vital resources that could be used for development and poverty alleviation as well. So anyway, my name's Clancy. I have the privilege of working for Transparency International Australia. We coordinate Transparency International's global mining program in approximately 23 countries around the world. I also have the privilege of sitting on the Extractives Industry Transparency Initiative Board, which is fantastic and a real privilege that I'm happy to do as well. Just to take one particular commodity, just as an example. So lithium, it's used in electric vehicle batteries, mobile phones, EVs, a whole bunch of products, laptops, things we use every day, right? We can't not use lithium batteries. But it's also a very corrupt-prone mineral. A couple of examples, just from the last few years. So in Zimbabwe, in the Sundana mine, which is emeralds and lithium, approximately 5,000 miners were found to be working in unsafe conditions. There are reports of child labour, and many, many miners died, I think, at the hands of an industrial accident as well. We're in Argentina, in the north of Argentina, as part of the lithium triangle, where Chinese companies paid overinflated prices for contracts that then helped them win lucrative mining license, which led to local women and men, many indigenous people being evicted from their land as well. Even companies are affected by corruption in the critical minerals and lithium sector, as an example. Just last year, an Australian mining company, where I come from, Atlantic Lithium, operating in Ghana, caught up in a corruption scandal. Overnight, they lost 32% of their shareholder value. Overnight, shareholders, mums and dads, institutional investors lost their stake and their kind of investment in this particular company. Even politicians get impacted by corruption in the minerals supply chain as well. Who can forget the former Prime Minister of Portugal, Antonio Costa, who had to resign over a corruption scandal involving some licenses and some companies that were involved with lithium as well. So from the private sector to people to politicians, everyone is impacted by corruption and often a lack of business integrity as well. We also know that the role of foreign actors is fueling these corruption risks, particularly China and other actors as well. We know that China, for example, in Indonesia, controls much of the nickel supply chain. Similarly, with the lithium supply chain, extraction, but also refinement as well. Just a bit about the broader context, and then I'll talk a bit more about our solution as well. I think we're all familiar with some of the figures, but the IEA, the International Energy Association, predicts about a 4 times increase in the production of critical minerals by 2040, a quadrupling of the demand. That means more mines, more minerals, potentially more people being affected by corruption risks and the impact of corruption as well, and challenges for businesses and governments as well. I also mentioned the role of China in the mining sector with critical minerals, and tomorrow I'm on a panel, I can talk more about that as well. But, you know, over the last 4, 5, maybe even 10 years, while the US, Australia and other countries have been asleep at the wheel, China has been buying up much of the world's critical mineral supplies as well. And this is having a corrupting influence, I think it's fair to say, on the mineral sector as well. Some other trends just quickly. The high demand for minerals is leading to an increase in mining licenses being awarded in jurisdictions with weak governance. For example, 26% of the world's lithium is in corrupt-prone jurisdictions. 67% of the world's nickel is in corrupt-prone jurisdictions, much of it in the Philippines, I hate to say. But we're also seeing a fast-tracking of processes, which is putting pressure on governments, but also companies as well, right? Lastly, but I think really importantly, much of the world's critical minerals is located on indigenous people's lands as well. A recent study showed that about 70% of all projects, critical minerals or energy transition minerals or green minerals, were located on or near indigenous people's lands as well. So that's the context. So TI, we do policy work, we do research, we also shine a light on corruption risks as well. The solution that we're working on at the moment, though, is around business integrity, incentivizing private sector compliance and improved anti-corruption performance as well. So what we did, as Brooke said, we took an existing tool that had been tested with about 30 companies, and we thought, how can we improve it, refine it, and scale it up, right? That's the whole point of innovation, scaling something up as well. And so with the help of the Jet Minerals Challenge and USAID and some other partners, we've spoken to mining stakeholders, communities in 5 countries, so Argentina, Colombia, Indonesia, Zimbabwe and Zambia, existing users of the tool, and we've refined it to make it even better, but particularly focused on the context of the energy transition. So the tool looks at things like fast tracking of licenses, impacts on indigenous peoples, the role of the state-owned enterprise, which is increasing in the critical mineral sector as well. So essentially it's an interactive and online tool that looks at 40 international best practice standards as well. It's really targeted at anti-bribery and corruption compliance officers, people who work in small, medium, or maybe large mining enterprises. And it provides 3 main things for these really important actors in these business supply chains as well. Number 1, it highlights the most critical policies and procedures for business integrity. Number 2, it gives them a framework. How are they performing? What could be improved? And number 3, it offers practical guidance and further resources where companies can do better and how they can access that information as well. Importantly, and some of the feedback we've had already, is that it's actually helping these kind of important stakeholders in the anti-bribery and corruption space develop a culture of compliance and ethics. It's empowering them with the tools, the data, which is really important, to have the conversations up the line with management, board, but also at the ground level, at the mine site with particular staff as well, but what they can do to improve anti-bribery and corruption performance as well. Importantly, one of the reflections we've had is, in those countries, it's really important to look at the ecosystem of actors. So our TI chapters have mapped out the existing anti-corruption stakeholders, chambers of commerce, companies that have already used the tool, getting them to actually share their experiences with potential companies as well, using the leverage of governments and diplomatic missions to incentivize companies as well to take the tool on. But it's also helping build a kind of a dialogue with civil society and these companies as well, which is really, really important. Just lastly, it does 3 main things for those kind of key important anti-corruption actors. 1, it empowers them. 2, it helps them reduce the risk of corruption. And 3, it helps dialogue internally, but also externally as well. What do we need to kind of scale this approach more? So we're targeting 25 companies, 5 countries around the world, big Chinese mining companies, small Australian companies, the broad spectrum of companies involved in critical minerals. But we need to scale. Marco offered who we can collaborate with. I'm really happy to take it to the Philippines if you want to. We've also had interest from people in Papua New Guinea, the DRC, Chile, Peru, South Africa, just to name a few countries. Okay, we want to be able to scale this tool as well. We're translating the tool into Chinese. It'd be great to translate into other languages as well. It's freely available, it's online, we've got materials, we can help you use it and talk through it. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Clancy. It's great to hear about the good work that you're doing and taking this existing tool across these regions. So I'm going to start with a question for you before we go over to the audience, and just think a little bit about what are you learning across these different countries, what insights do you glean by looking at a tool in multiple countries vice focusing on a single region or country?
Yeah, every context is different. That's clear. So, I mean, a really pleasing result so far was that we launched the tool in Argentina just last week, and we had 150 people attend, including quite a significant percentage of business people and industry representatives as well, like a big launch event. I think the reflection around engaging with Chinese mining companies is it's hard. It takes time. You need to build trust, right? So we're developing guidance on how civil society can do that more effectively as well. If we don't engage with Chinese companies, to be frank, there's no point working on critical minerals and anti-corruption, to be frank. So I think there are two kind of key reflections. The third one would be finding those champions in those companies and working with them, empowering them, building trust. And the idea of the project is to work with companies, but then build dialogue, use it as a platform for advocacy, for further work. So it's not just a standalone tool, but actually creates an enabling environment for better practice and policy over the long term as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So Marco and Elavine, we'll go in this order, but I'm going to have the same question for both of you, which is noting that where the impact is at the local level. How do you create awareness and appreciation for the transnational, for the kleptocratic, for the high-level corruption that we're trying to mitigate in this space? What resonates, and how do you translate those issues, or what do you hear from those issues from the community level? So Marco, we'll start with you.
Well, so far in our experience, communities are aware of what is due to them, but often they know how much they should be receiving. So, for example, we have communities, they know that they're entitled to royalties, but they don't know how much. So, what we're trying to do is first make them aware of what is due to them, and then so that they could ask smarter and better questions with their local leaders. So we also have local governments. For a time, they didn't really care about what they're receiving from mining because they know that it's being transferred by the national government. But when we showed to them the actual data, they realized that no, that data is not accurate. So they know that they should be receiving more. So when showing to them the data, they realize what is due to them. So now they're able to ask more questions and hold other stakeholders to account.
Yeah, absolutely. You're jotting notes. Are you thinking hard?
Okay. Thank you, Brock, for that question. How I got is that now how do we bridge the gap between the local communities and the high-level policymakers? So to respond to this, for the local communities, we are mainly focusing on the empowerment aspect by bringing the right information to the local communities. I'll be honest, there was a point where most civil society organizations in Malawi who also did not fully understand the mining sector, that they were taking the wrong message to the communities, which most of them, they were being seen as anti-mining. So that's where you could see there was a lot of conflict between the communities and the mining companies because the narrative then was mainly that mining is bad. But our approach is that we give the communities full information. What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the advantages that this project can come in? How do they benefit? How do they effectively participate? And what are the potential challenges that they might encounter? So this allows the communities to make informed decisions, or actually to be fully aware, and they get empowered. And as a result, they do have quality engagements with the prospective mining company, as well as the local policymakers in that area. And secondly, now this messaging, how do we take it up? Because even the policymakers, like the government officials, they also had a perception that the communities would be against mining. But now with the change in the narrative, they're like, okay, so I think they should they should put the right policies and implement them accordingly, that they should indeed meet the needs of the communities. And most importantly, I think I also want to mention that coming in of EITI in Malawi has helped because it created a multi-stakeholder group which now brings together the civil society, the companies, and also the government. And this platform has helped to fully understand the opinions of the civil society, the opinions of the companies and all that, and how now do we create a win-win situation. So even as Perekezi, we're also leveraging on that we have found this potential positive environment. So how do we fully utilize it that we benefit, or we generate, or we have our wins, we make mining sustainable. So we're basically also leveraging on that.
Yeah, so, and we have Gay from Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative in the audience. I don't know if you paid her for the public service announcement, but if you do, it's directly a benefit of being an outreach partner on the Grand Challenge. So thanks to EITI for that as well. I have several more questions, but I'm going to take a beat and see if there's anything from the audience to kick us off. As well. And we also welcome, if you're doing something innovative in the mineral space and you want to share the work that you're doing, it doesn't have to be a question. This is also a space to share more about the work that you're doing. So, anything burning? Do we have a... We got to make sure all the people who are watching this video after.
Ah, perfect. Thank you. I actually would like to hear a little bit more about the RMBI tool. My name is Claudia Sahne and I work for the GIZ in Germany, but I also worked for Transparency International before. And one of my areas is anti-corruption and natural resources or mining as well in that case. So I would really love to know if the information that the companies put into the tool, if they are publicly available afterwards, and also, a little bit more about if there are also smaller companies that are participating in this kind of analysis, and if you are trying to address the small companies, especially the clandestine mining as well in some cases. Of course, not with that tool because that makes no sense, but in generally speaking.
Great, thank you for your question. So firstly, we're not looking at ASM or illegal mining with this tool, obviously, but it is really designed for small and medium enterprises, so junior and mid-tier mining companies. Generally, they have weaker anti-bribery, corruption compliance programs. But we've also had very big, large companies use it. Rio Tinto, BHP, Woodside Energy, Huayu Cobalt is very interested in using the tool. Okay, one of the world's largest integrated critical minerals companies. Right, it's in Chinese now. We've spoken to them. They're interested, which is great. So it can be used by different stakeholders, different sizes of companies, and they get different things out of it. Right. I think increasingly we've seen in a couple of examples, and this was some feedback through the solution iteration process, the actual design process, was that along the value chain, companies are getting, requested and pressured by the end users, right? Mm-hmm. It's often legislation that's driving it, but it's also expectations from, companies like Tesla as well, right? So I think there's growing expectations. The tool's, targeted at small, medium companies, but it can be used by anyone. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Oh, on the information, sorry, there's one more thing. The information, they can't use it publicly. They can't say, oh, we got a 65 out of 100 on TI's, RMBI tool, but we also can't name and shame them, right? We can do that other times, we can shine a light on corruption without doubt, but the tool, it's private, it's private information. Otherwise, we need to build trust. So it's kind of kept secret, and we use it as a sort of engagement tool. We follow up and talk to them about it as well. But yeah, it's not public, and they can't get accreditation or like a green washing kind of certificate for it either. Yeah.
So where do you go when they've gotten the review of the tool? What's the next step?
Yeah,
when they've gotten their private scorecard.
Yeah. So we get the results. We do some more analysis. We share it back with them. Then we set up a webinar or in-face meeting. There's more guidance we can offer. In one example involving a very large mining company, an ASX-listed Australian mining company operating in Southern East Africa, it actually led to a dialogue platform being developed. There were some issues around civic space happening in that location, and the use of the tool and some sort of engagement led to an improved relationship, and I think hopefully long-term better outcomes and better practice both for communities and the company as well. So yeah, it's having benefits. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I have a question about costs because for those who are familiar with EITI, this is a new provision that we have added to the 2023 EITI standard, which encourages countries to also declare the costs of the mining projects, because that has always been the missing piece in the puzzle, right? EITI has been requiring disclosure of revenues, payments to government, but not really the cost. And we know that's also an area that is very prone to corruption. So I wanted to ask anyone from the speakers who want to respond, what has been, have there been discussions about disclosing costs as well, maybe in the predict tool, Marco, because that could also figure into the forecasting of revenues, right, for mining projects. So interesting to hear if that has been discussed and what has been the reaction of companies or governments with respect to that disclosure. Thank you.
Do you want to start, Marco?
Yeah, sure. So far, we don't have discussions yet when it comes to disclosing cost of mining projects, but I think it's a very important data point for stakeholders because it has a lot of implications when it comes to how much local governments can collect in terms of their corporate income, whether mining companies are bloating this cost. And it also has implications with the social development and management programs for communities. So it actually connects because in our legal framework, 1.5% of operating costs of mining companies should be allotted for community development. So we think it's very relevant. It's something that we can raise with our communities, but definitely open to disclosing it with maybe support from the EITI for sure. Thank you.
Do you want to take a pass at cost? Have you? So, Elohim, has cost come up yet in terms of what communities want to know about mining projects, the value of the project?
I think it's something that has not really come out in black and white, but I'm sure when we're now engaging with the EITI Secretariat, it's one of the things that they're going to raise. But from what I'm hearing, it's something really important because sometimes the costs it's either they're under declared if they're linked to tax, or they might be over declared. So I think it will also be an important aspect.
Yeah, it's an interesting space, and it's an interesting space to be aware of the requirement of the EITI standards and to be able to use the voices of the communities and journalists to be able to elevate that as well. So we'll come back. Oh, sorry, did you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, for Clancy, on the RMBI tool, I would like to know if there are also standards that includes, like for example, the subcontracting. Like for example, in the Philippines, some mining companies in an island on nickel mining, they do subcontracting with Chinese contractors. And when we asked the government agency that monitors it, they said that they don't have a guidelines yet on the subcontracting. So subcontracting are happening for like years, and with Chinese companies we don't know, and even the government doesn't also not very they're not really monitoring that. So is it also included in the standards? Thank you.
Sure. So the tool, it gets companies to self-assess their practice against a series of indicators and questions. The indicators have been based on 40 international standards, GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, the Extractives Industry Transparency Initiative, IRMA, OECD, a whole bunch of frameworks. Perhaps some of the issues around subcontracting you mentioned probably come up around procurement, contract disclosure, perhaps. I'm not sure, to be honest, but they would, I imagine. Yeah, I don't think I know exactly what you're asking, but I imagine they would pick up some of those issues. But it's also a self-assessment, so it's not available publicly, right? Yep. But yeah, just on Gay's question, that issue hasn't come up about costs, but we know that it does help companies prepare for EITI reporting as well, because it's asking certain parts of the standard and actually prepares them for national level reporting. So it can be useful in that sense.
So maybe you can build cost into your tool.
Sure.
That'll be easy, I'm sure. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit and asking if maybe you can talk about, because so I know probably your focus for coming to this session was an interest in the minerals space. At the same time, I think that hearing about and investing in these tools, these solutions, came through a process under the Grand Challenge. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your journey as being a jet minerals solver. Just describe a little bit the process, and I'm going to come back and ask for highs and lows, so you can be thinking about that. But maybe we'll start down with Clancy a little bit. You can talk about the first phases of the application. What did that look like? How did that feel like? And then we'll move down.
Sure. So it was a little bit like sitting a test at school. We had to fill out a form and we weren't sure if we were going to get the right answers and we're a bit nervous. Do you want me to talk about the boot camp or are you going to come to that as well?
I mean, you can. You could also pass it off to Marco at whatever point you want.
I'll stay on the school analogy and then I'll pass on to Marco.
Perfect.
So we did okay in the test. We got invited to a boot camp. But that was also like your first day at school. You're kind of not really sure what you're going to expect. There were great instructions. Like it was very clear there was an agenda, and I don't want to downplay the organisation, but it was a bit nerve-wracking, to be honest. You know, we were going into a room with 20 other potential applicants, experts in the field. You know, people from Amazon, Tesla, I think, lots of private sector government representatives as well. But the bootcamp process was fantastic. It was hands-on. There was mentoring from other experts, a lot of peer-to-peer mentoring, which I found really valuable as well. And through that process, we actually got a much better project solution than had when we started. And I think that's going to lead to greater impacts as well. So the bootcamp was fantastic. Despite it being a bit like, oh my God, we're going to school. What are we going to do? What's going to happen? We passed with flying colours and we loved it. So, yeah.
Yeah, Marco, what was maybe we can kick from boot camp and then after boot camp experience over to you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to reinforce what Clancy said about the boot camp. It was very exciting. It was like going to school. We have templates that we need to fill out. There are all these boxes. But we really appreciated the iterative process of the entire application process because nothing is really cast in stone. Everything is a living document. We can always change it as we learn, which we think is very important in advancing change, right? Every step of the way, we learn something new. This works, that does not work. So with the iterative process, we're able to be more agile in a way. So that we think is very important in our work because we're also learning. The low, I think, was, well, the start. Well, can I say the due diligence?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. It's a genuine question. We are a transparent and accountable organization that likes to learn. So.
No, but that's very understandable. The due diligence process for us was the most difficult part, but at the same time, it also helped us improve our internal governance processes. We realized that there are things that we can still improve on. So, so it's a double-edged sword in a way. It was difficult, but at the same time, it helped us improve. So, but so far, like I mentioned a while ago, that kind of prepared us for the project implementation, and now we're sailing quite smoothly.
Well, I don't know if you'll be happy to know or less happy to know. It's always difficult when you are the inaugural cohort under an activity. We definitely took some lessons learned, and your feedback. We seek feedback. Your feedback is well heard across the cohort. So others will have a lighter due diligence process than you did. So blessing or curse, I'm not sure. It depends on your worldview, I suppose. If your glass is half full or half empty. But what about you? What high or low? High and low.
High low. Okay. For us, I'll say that we think we had quite an interesting experience. It starts from the application phase. When we saw the call, we're like, okay, there's the Jet Minos challenge. There's some technical ways that we had to familiarize ourselves with and say that, are we ready to apply for this? And I think the first of all was the differentiation between the green minerals, critical minerals, and what. So we had a long debate as a team, and then decide that okay, so how do we proceed? So yeah, and I think another thing that was also trying to push us back was that most of the mining projects, especially on the critical minerals in Malawi, they're just under exploration. So we're looking at the challenges talking about corruption, but our projects are under exploration. What if we don't find that is linked to corruption? So those were our fears, but still more we proceeded with the application, and we were very excited when we were shortlisted amongst the top 20. And the boot camp, actually, it's the one that helped to build our confidence, because the sessions, they clearly explained about the critical minerals and the green minerals, so we saw that our debate back at home was actually addressed. And secondly, also the aspect of our projects, most of the mining projects might being under exploration, I think it was clearly answered during the boot camp, because we're talking about not corruption. It doesn't always manifest. Sometimes you protect it from manifesting. So we also felt more confident that we are ready to participate in this and to compete in this. So I think those were our experiences about the confidence and also learning from the peers. I feel like it was a good idea of holding the boot camp. Honestly, when we just saw the agenda, I think like what Claudia said, when you looked at the agenda, it brought a certain fear like, am I really going to be relevant in this platform? Am I going to benefit? What we didn't know about the expectations, but then going through the experience, it really helped to build confidence in small organizations like us. And this is also a message to others that it doesn't matter whether you're a small organization or big organization, the playground favors everyone. We are an example. We're very small. We opted for a smaller grant, but we were not sure if we were going to be successful because, of the confidence issues. So our experience is that the whole platform, I think, was open and flexible to everyone. The due diligence process, yes, that was that was another law, but in a positive way, because even as a small organization or as a small team, we're able to see that where do we have the gaps. And the good thing is that even through the due diligence process, it was not like an exam that they will mark you wrong and you will not proceed, but then they would help you improve. So that's an aspect that we also appreciated. And looking now at even in the implementation phase, they still took the information that was collected during the due diligence, that these are the areas where Perekezi need to be supported. So it's been an experience, but we have appreciated every step. It's highs, it's lows, but we still proceed. Yeah.
Clancy, do you have similar highs and lows, something different?
Not much to add. Luckily, I had a staff member do the due diligence, so I was sort of just above all the pain, perhaps, and suffering. But no, due diligence is incredibly important. So
Yes.
it's obviously part of the process. I think the boot camp was probably the high, to be honest.
Yeah, and so from our perspective, team in the audience, I don't know if anyone on the Grand Challenge team wants to add anything, but I would say one of the things I thought was so interesting is just the model of doing things differently. So you might have organizations or actors who had never applied for USAID funding before or received it in the room. You might have organizations that have long-standing, history of partnering with USAID or working with USAID in the room. And the goal is really to create a level playing field. And I felt, when going into the boot camp, fun to know that the homework sheet, creates fear. It's good feedback. And I'm okay with a little bit of hazing if the outcome if it works towards a good outcome. At the same time, I think one of the things going into the room that we really had to emphasize, and on several breaks, other members of your cohort came up to me, was just this fear of like, we're all in the room with people we're competing against. And are you going to be judging us? What can we say? And I think for my experience, my observation was at the start, there's this hesitancy, there's this reluctance. But at the end of the 2 days, we recognized that being in this room together and doing the work, the goal was everybody was going to walk out having strengthened their ability to engage in this space because they were going to learn something from each other one way or another, whether you ultimately were successful in your application, which you all were here, whether you weren't, which 9 other solvers weren't, or semifinalists weren't, but that there was the goal was not solely to get the grant and to get the technical assistance and to have the engagement and be part of this cohort going forward. It was also to learn from each other with the intrinsic value. So that was an interesting process and something that we do different. I'll pass it over to questions, but the last thing before we maybe potentially switch gears back would be that the design phase, the first part of the first homework assignment that you had to do to see how you were going to score is a 4-page concept paper. So I don't know if anybody else in the room has ever applied for funding for USAID, but a 4-page concept paper is a pretty nice opportunity and part of our commitment to lowering barriers to partnering with and engaging with the U.S. government, USAID, in this space. And then the next phase after the boot camp, in this case, was a final application. I can't remember how many pages it was, but it was not the 50-page, document. I think the most arduous was the due diligence, and at that point you're already hooked. you're in, so you'll stick with us. So we're really committed in this space to reducing barriers, to increasing and diversifying the partners that are working in this space and making these investments. So maybe last question that I'll ask, and then if there's others we can. And also I am very comfortable with ending on a rock solid note here, but I'll turn it back to the audience in case there's more contributions. But knowing, being where you are now, is there anything that you would do differently, or anything that you would incorporate into the way that you're operating if you could go back in time and redesign your application or your solution? Yeah. Yeah. Can we start with you? Or whoever has a thought. Do you have a thought? No? Okay.
That's why I'm volunteering, Elvin.
There we go. We'll go this way then.
Oh, like the first question is that we would ask for more money.
Fair. That's
Well, yeah, because we have seen that we were just piloting, and then we have seen that it's something that is scalable. So yeah, what we'll do different now is we'll ask for more money, that we have more engagements, we reach out to a wider community, a wider group, and that. Yeah, I think for now that's my response.
Absolutely.
I think what we would do differently would be to consult our stakeholders way before we implemented the project, because when we applied for the grant, a lot of our assumptions are really just assumptions that this is relevant, this is important. And as we engage with our stakeholders, we realized that some of our project components are not really relevant, and that there are actually other components that are more important to them. So previously, our focus was mostly revenues and economic data. That's why the tool is called projecting revenues. But as we engage with more and more stakeholders, we realize that this is just one aspect of mining. We also have social and environmental aspects of mining, and now it's becoming more a larger part of our initiative. And that, I think, would have made our project more relevant to our stakeholders. But being the agile team that we are, we're learning and iterating our project. Yeah.
Great. Firstly, I'd just like to, reiterate what you were saying, Brooke, about the approach and how accessible it is for civil society. And I'd also encourage any other donors or people that are linked with institutional donors to encourage them to contribute to the fund or actually replicate the Innovation Challenge as well, because it's quite hard for small organisations, like you've heard, to actually access money from governments. So anyone who's involved as GIZ or other institutional donors, consider the approach or join the Jet Minerals or the Grand Challenge as well. It works, it's scalable, it's a good thing. I guess what we would probably have done differently is probably focus a bit more. We're working with 5 chapters, 5 countries. It's pretty broad, it's spread out, right? So the problem we faced was there was a lot of demand, and we couldn't say no to people. That was the kind of our own failing, right? I remember saying, let's do 3 or 4, and no, but there's 5 or 6 chapters that want to do it. So I think we probably, in hindsight, maybe should have just done 3 or 2 even, but we decided to do 5. So anyway, we'll see how we go. I think that's the reflection. Yeah.
So be more ambitious and be more targeted, and be more consultative up front or earlier in the consultative phase. So Claudia, if you want to pledge a commitment on behalf of GIZ now to join the Grand Challenge, please feel free. We welcome it. Yes.
So while you are talking about the challenge, how are we going to join the challenge? I think for my part, because we're talking about energy transition, we feel we are working with communities impacted by nickel mining in the Philippines, and we attended a lot of CSO convening on energy transition and those things. And what we feel right now is that a lot of funding goes to NGOs and support groups, supporting communities who are into renewable because of the energy transition thing. But I think one of the challenges also for funders like USAID and other funders would be to also look into supporting communities who are the host of the critical minerals, because right now we don't get enough support. All of the funding donors are going into NGOs supporting communities to have like access to cleaner energy. But the communities who are the source of these critical minerals are left. And all the tools, like for example, it's like to help mining companies to be, to be better companies in order for them to mine more or to justify the mining. And what we don't see right now in the whole discussion of the energy transition is, are there also available support for communities to speak, to talk? What are the standards for their part if they would say yes to mining? So all of the things are being discussed outside of communities, and these communities are all left behind. And everything is very fast. Everything is fast tracked. Tools, international standards, everything. I don't say they're not good, they are. But the spaces provided for not only civil societies, but local communities and indigenous communities, I think are not really included in all of the discussion. So I think that's one challenge also for the funding donors to also take a look and balance everything. It's good that we fund innovations, but sometimes those innovations does not have a good impact or doesn't have an impact to the local communities. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's so important to think about the local community level, and I think part of what's really nice about the composition of this panel is I think it demonstrates the range and the recognition that we have to be operating at all of these levels, right? And so you have Elavine, who is looking at the preventative space in Malawi, where you can get out ahead of and educate so that as these movements move forward, the communities that you're working in are really aware of what the potential risks are really informed of what their rights are and how to operate and to be able to give voice. And then you have Marco, once the deals are made, I mean, you're completely right, start up front. And that's part of, I think, what was particularly compelling about the proposal that Perekezi put forward, is let's get out in front of this, right? And it goes to Marco's earlier point about consult your stakeholders early on, right? And then you have Marco's solution. Okay, some deals are going to be done. That's the reality. Deals are done. There are things that communities are supposed to get. Let's educate them. Let them know about what their rights are so that they're getting the benefits when the deals are done. And then you have TI Australia's approach, which is so complementary because we can educate all we want and inform all we want, but fundamentally you have to have the buy-in from both the governments and the private sector companies who are doing the deals to be able to build it in at the outset, to feel the pressure, to feel the importance of having deals that serve the communities that are the hosts of these resources back to their benefit. And so I really think that and I would be curious if it was a different, that wasn't actually our intent of this structure per se, but I would be really curious if we scrambled and had a different composition of the solvers, what that universe would look like. But as we built out this cohort, part of what we were thinking about is how do we look at this? We might not be doing it from soup to nuts in one particular country or one particular mineral, but how do we build a cohort that's looking across and complementing each other as they move forward? And so I think your point is is clearly taken, and I hope that we can advocate and elevate the importance of it. We also have other solvers who are doing investigative journalism in multiple countries in Africa that are similarly upfront, that are advocating for, from the outset, get the community voices in there. I'm going to pause to see if anyone has something they want to add on that point before I move on.
No, just to say, I completely agree, Bon. Absolutely. I mean, the work that we're doing, it's with 5 chapters, but they're also doing community outreach, policy advocacy as well. So it's not a standalone activity or project. It's complementary to other work that the TI chapter is doing on the ground. Otherwise, you don't get the full benefits. So, yeah, 100% agree, though.
Yes, in the back here.
Hi, I'm Jason Lee. First of all, I learned a lot from your presentation. I have to be honest that I am not in your industry at all. I'm actually in biotech. And I thought that the defense company is the most corrupted industry, but I just learned today that it's mining instead. Anyway, but I guess my question is to Clancy. It seems like you have around the world experiences, and you are from Australia, who has a big mining industry and probably the better regulated industry in the developed world or developed country. So after we heard so many sad and horrible stories, can you give us one example during your career you see that a community actually benefit from the mining industry in terms of reach a balance of ecology and then the community outreach and the people. Actually, the people around the mining actually benefit from the project instead of just the big companies. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, mining is an extractive industry, right? It's an extractive process inherently. There have been some recent developments in Australia where royalties are actually going directly to Indigenous communities, First Nations communities, and actually have ownership of the mining companies and the projects. Traditionally, they got a royalty payment that would be negotiated in secret. Huge power imbalance between the mining companies and the traditional owners. Happens everywhere, right? It's in the Australian context. Just recently, though, the Indigenous peoples and First Nations group actually own the mine. They have an Indigenous-owned company, controlled company, so they're directing traffic, they're making decisions, they're governing the organisation as well. So I think that's a nice example. But it's an extractive industry. It harms the environment, unfortunately. But there needs to be safeguards to stop that and good business integrity and transparency and community involvement as well.
I really like this question, and I think it's a good gauntlet thrown. I think one of the things that we have in a space where you're trying to get a focus of attention to say this issue really matters is that we tend to tell the negative stories. We paint the picture of how problematic this is to justify the solutions. And I think it challenges us to I believe it exists. And you've challenged me to say I should have at the tip of my tongue in the same way that I can cite the communities who have had, yes, exactly. So maybe we can also find in the crowd searching and the community agreements we can look for those success stories. How are the community agreements and the resources that are coming out of them being positively used? And I do know these stories. I have heard them in the Democratic Republic of Congo, for example, where I've done a lot of work, but they're not at the tip of my tongue, and that's unfortunate. It should be. So thank you for that, provocative question.
Hi, my name is Roberta Falvo. I'm an anti-corruption associate expert at the UN Office Against Drugs and Crime. I have a question for the panelists from the Philippines. Did you disaggregate data by age of the community members that you engaged? I'm very interested to see if you engaged also youth population and to know, their responses or interests, just to see as the future leaders or what they think about that.
Yes, great question. As required by the USAID inclusivity template, we do
That you
collect.
learned about during due diligence?
Yes, that's part of the due diligence. That's part of the process if you get a grant. So we do collect this kind of data per stakeholder. So we ask for their sex, for their sector, for the age, and so on. And we've done 4 outreach activities so far. And what we've learned is that, yes, most of the stakeholders that we've been engaging are young at heart. So not really the young people. And so our intervention with that is we're doing a data use competition for young people with our partner academic institutions because we realize that that is the only way we can sustain this movement. These are young people who will be the future leaders of their communities. And we even got feedback that it shouldn't be just the students, but really the young leaders in the communities themselves to be engaged in this kind of activities so that we're kind of planting the seed for the future because we cannot we'll be gone like in a few years, so it's good to be cultivating these leaders as well. So we're also very conscious to include them in our capacity development activities so that we have these young champions who will be next in line. Yeah.
I think someone actually, that's the second time today I've heard young at heart, and the first time was describing me.
Oh.
So,
What a coincidence.
yeah. You can rock, paper, scissors, Katya.
You want to go first, Amy? Yeah, hello, I'm Katja. I'm also part of the Grand Challenge team, and I also, as some others here, have a past life at Transparency International. And I joined the Grand Challenge after this initiative was launched, so really great to hear also firsthand what has been achieved, really impressive. I have a question related to what I've done like maybe 10 years ago at TI, where we were looking at transparency in corporate reporting, and we were strongly advocating for public country-by-country reporting. And I think in that space, some progress has been made. I mean, there's also more regulation now in this space, but we have also argued for voluntary country-by-country reporting, I mean, public country-by-country reporting. And that means that companies publish actually the revenues that they make in a country, the taxes that they pay, and so on. So really important financial data. And my question is, does that have any impact on your work, or are you using these data points, like what countries are basically, the revenues they make, the taxes they pay? I mean, is that something that plays a role, basically, and is something that's helping you? Thank you.
So you're asking a softball question, basically, right? Easy one.
I would say yes. I mean, organisations that I've been involved with have used publicly available data through the Extractives Industry Transparency Initiative or the EU laws that require mining companies to disclose their revenue payments at a project level. It's been used by journalists, civil society actors to hold companies to account. So absolutely, it gets used every day, I think. Well, not every day, but regularly. And then the act of disclosing also reduces the risk of corruption and tax evasion or avoidance, right? We know that from many, many studies as well. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe I may also add to that. I will agree with him that indeed this information is actually helping to actually bring out more things that we didn't know. For example, in Malawi, there was oil exploration, and one of the conditions with the exploration companies was that they pay a training fee or a training fund to the Ministry of Mining. Previously, we didn't know about this up until when we came up with our first EITI report, and that's what raised the alarm. And now with that information, we're able to engage the Ministry of Mining, and then that's when they disclosed that indeed we do have this training fund, but only that they couldn't really disclose it. So that did not only help us as civil society to know that there's a fund that the oil companies pay, but it also helped people within the institution, within the Ministry of Mining that needed training but could not attend. So with this disclosure, it now helps that the money should be used in the right way. So I would agree that these transparency initiatives or the disclosure of information, it's helping to address some of the challenges that we initially didn't see. So it has improved the situation, of the governance situation, I should say.
All right, I'll ask a question. I'm Amy Crocker-Selzer. I'm the Senior Monitoring, Evaluation, Research, and Learning Advisor in USAID's Anti-Corruption Center. And my question is for Brooke, because it's always great to put your boss on the spot at an international conference.
I'm down.
But you asked everybody else about their highs and lows. So I want to ask you about that. And you can just do highs, or like maybe what have you learned from this process?
Yeah, thank you. Now I understand how you all probably felt like, 15 minutes ago. So, no, super fair. I think I'm going to start with lows because I don't like to end on a low note. So, I will start with the low. And I think for me, the low probably was, and this was with all due respect, was the fact that we weren't able to fund all 20 semifinalists who came forward. It was really challenging to have a boot camp to get exposure to the excitement and the good work that was being done, and every single participant, every single representative at the boot camp, every single solution had value and merit and would positively contribute. And so I think that my low is just that which we couldn't fund or couldn't support was the challenge. And I think my high is that we, as the Grand Challenge model, are focused on building a network, of building partnerships, of engaging across the community. So although our semifinalists might not have received the grant, they didn't get the pleasure of going through the due diligence process and then coming out on the other side. That doesn't mean that they're not able to engage, and there aren't other pathways for being able to participate in, benefit from, learn from the Grand Challenge. And again, I think just the experience of the boot camp itself was a gift, an opportunity, an investment that had value add. And we have heard from some of the other solvers, that we held the boot camp on the margins of the Organization for Economic Cooperation for Development, OECD, Responsible Mining Forum. And there were solvers who had been trying to go to OECD, RM, to the conference, that hadn't been able to get into it, but because they were part of the cohort that was coming for the boot camp, they were able to get into the conference. And so I feel the high is the value add that you get across the group. And then this panel, of course, that was the other high. And so let me just close by thanking you all for coming, for staying. It's an evening session. It's as Clancy said, we're on day 4. We really appreciate it. The last thing that I'll just note is the Powering a Just Energy Transition Green Minerals Challenge. Wow. The Jet Minerals Challenge is our first activity. We've also done efforts. We've done a series of hackathons in collaboration with Accountability Lab, Development Gateway, and the Center for International Private Enterprise, and the State Department, U.S. State Department Bureau for Narcotics and Law Enforcement. We have also launched a call focused on private sector integrity. Stay tuned. We're about to roll out the 10 most promising solutions from doing business with integrity. And we have yesterday, our chief of party, Phyllis Doninio, announced the Safeguarding Carbon Markets Challenge. So if this process or idea is exciting to you, check that out. I think the team has postcards. You can look, you can apply, learn more about the Grand Challenge. And if neither of those have interest to you, stay tuned. More to come. Prizes for health, supply chain work, and much, much more. So please watch the Grand Challenge space, because we really hope to build out our group beyond this exceptional cohort, including these 3 great colleagues. Let me thank the team for the logistical support, the Grand Challenge team, not only for this organizing the event today, but also for all of the work that you do every day. I am not an easy boss, as Amy can attest to. I'm very demanding with high standards, and the team continues to meet or exceed them on a daily basis. And to our solvers, I think that somewhere Kim is noting the power of commitment and persistence, and just thrilled to see how you brought your creativity and your unique approaches to really tackle one of the most pressing issues that we're facing today. So thank you for your commitment and your work.
Bye.